seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me today. Our video is on Sony. Sony was not at CES 2023 in Las Vegas, which we've covered, and you've seen videos from LG, Samsung, TCL, and Hisense, and Sony was not there. What was super interesting was not that they weren't there, but the comments from many of you guys, the panic, the anticipation, the thoughts, the opinions, what you guys were really thinking in that moment where they weren't available. For me as a content creator, I was actually disappointed that they weren't there, as I wanted to see their lineup and obviously report on it for you. Also, as a content creator, I was totally fine that they weren't there. It gives me a little more time to breathe, and it gives me a totally separate amount of content to bring you, including this video here. Speculation, conversation, discussion is what this channel is really all about. So for this video, as we start, I want to know what your thoughts are. What did you think about Sony's 2022 TV lineup? We're going to focus primarily on TVs in this video. What are your thoughts for the 2023 lineup? 2022, we had for the LED, we had a full array local dimming X90K. We also had a 4K flagship mini LED X95K, as well as the 8K flagship Z9K. We had the A80K for their OLEDs. We also had the A95K in their QD-OLED. We had the A90K in the 42 and 48 inch sizes. All that said, it was a much more streamlined decision by Sony, streamlined launch, very similar to their 2021 lineup, except for the X95 being available in the less sizes, from 65 up to 85 versus the X95J, which had more availability. They have a more streamlined, more consolidated lineup. Now, that said, what are your thoughts going into next year, or I should say this year, 2023? I want to know in the comments what your hopes are, what your dreams are, what your fears are, the speculation and the discussion. Now, were you guys worried that they weren't there? For me, there was absolutely no worry at all. Now, I was very fortunate to have an exclusive interview with Sony's Rob Brennan, which will air 2 days after this video on Friday. And that is an amazing interview. It is very long. I do not want to chop it up and put it in separate videos. I want to leave it in its entirety. We discuss a lot about Sony, their signature, their influence, their direction. We talk a lot about what they're into going into this year without revealing the lineup. And I don't have information on their lineup, so like you, I'm left speculating. But check out that interview with Rob Brennan. He's brilliant and knows his stuff, and obviously is right in the mix for what Sony is doing in the upcoming year. For me, I was never really afraid. Sony, some of you guys thought Sony weren't going to have panels this year. They were going to back out. Obviously not the case. I think for me, they basically are hanging back. Now, even before I spoke to Rob, we all kind of really thought that Sony was not wanting to be in the middle of everybody else. They didn't want to be there. Sony itself, if you look at CES, which I really didn't have enough time to see all that CES had to offer outside of TVs, but it's a massive event that covers robotics, phones, cars, and Sony showed a lot of that, a lot of PlayStation, VR, other products. Sony's TV part of it stepped back and will be doing their own event and their own launch and their own reveal in a separate event at some time. We're all waiting for that to be announced to find out what that's going to be. But it's not because they're scared. It's not because they're worried. And it's not because they're waiting to see what everyone else does. The reason I say that is the panels and TVs are done. The technology is done. Even the fine tuning, things of that nature, manufacturing wise, are finished. So there isn't any of that. But what are your questions? Being a Sony fan, what are your thoughts? What is your speculation? Let's talk about that in the comments. Let me know what you think. For me, I'm interested to see what they do with QD-OLED. Are they going to have a 77-inch version this year? Will they have an 83-inch version this year? Will they have an 83-inch version A80K this year? If you look at their lineup from the year before, the A90J Master Series, incredible panel, incredible TV. I want to see another 83-inch this year. Will that be an A90J successor? Will you see an 83-inch with a heatsink? Will you see an A80K successor without a heatsink? So it's always interesting in watching these companies battle. When you see, especially LG from the year before, you had the, I should say the even year before that, when you go back into the A90J. A90J releases 83 inches with a heatsink. It was really on its own. Other than Panasonic, it was the first to market with a heatsink. The brightest OLED ever made. Again, other than Panasonic. Cannot talk about Panasonic because I can't see their products. We have a funny video coming up on that as well. So the A90J is there. C1 really couldn't compete. I believe the C1 that, not the C1, the G1 that year may not even have had an 83-inch, leaving the C1 to go after the A90J without a heatsink. So the next year, when you see the G2 and the C2 both have 83-inch models, and then have the A90J be the year before, then the A80K comes out and tops out at 77 inches. So you can see these releases, how they combat each other is what's really interesting. You can see Sony knock that back out if they come out with another heat-synced A90J successor. Doesn't need to be a Master Series. Now, as I speculate, just like you, I have no information at all about what they're bringing. I just know they're bringing great stuff. I was assured of that, but I did not press or want to ask. So I'm speculating just like you, which is the fun discussion. I want to see an A90J successor. For me, it doesn't have to be a Master Series. I just want to see Sony come back in with an 83-inch. I also do, so here's my speculation. Let's do that. We'll start with the OLED lineup. I do and hope and dream they'd have a QD-OLED. I don't think that's possible. I think that those displays are made elsewhere, and that size is 77, 60, 65, and 55. So what I am hoping for is an 83-inch successor to the A90J with a heatsink, which will be in the A80 category. I'm not sure of the letters they're using, so I won't start calling them different letters. So what I want to see is more sizes for the A80K successor, which would go right after the C3 this year. It'd be amazing to see that with a heatsink and be brighter. That way, blowing out the C3, which is slightly better than last year. It'll be doing their pixel boost technology and their perceived peak brightness with their pixel boost to make it brighter, but they won't have the MLA technology on the C series. So that would be an amazing opportunity for the A80 lineup to have more sizes and blow out the C series. Now you'll have the G3 at 83 inches will not have that technology either. So what you would have is Sony's 83-inch heat-synced brighter model going against the smaller G3. The G3 again will have a heatsink, but won't have the MLA technology at the 83 in size, giving them a win right off the bat. So to me, that would be an easy win for them, as again, the only 83-inch offering from them last year was actually the A90J from the year before, which was still very expensive as it was a Master Series, but then again was getting to be a couple years old. So an 83-inch offering would be amazing. Obviously, we wish it was QD-OLED, so we would hope that would be in the A80 class. Now, the A90, 42, and 48-inch was confusing for many of you as it didn't have a heatsink, but was still considered a higher end than the C2. Those should probably be A80s as well to drive down the price and compete directly with the C3. You can see where it gets a little bit confusing, but that would be a win for them as well. Or add a heatsink to the A90K at 42. I'm saying A90K, but the successor is what I mean, to have it beat out the C3. So as you can see, as they draw their battle plans, and the way at least I look at it as far as battle plans, is how are you combating their alternative? Are you going against the G or are you going against the C? And also, they are the only company that has both WRGB OLEDs and QD-OLED, which for me, as I talk with Rob, kind of really said that, wow, that's actually a strength, that the only company that offers full array, mini LED, QD-OLED, WRGB projectors. They have almost every technology out there, as they don't have to make their own panels, which I always felt was a weakness. Having to buy from other manufacturers actually makes them a little bit more nimble, and they can choose what direction they're in. Again, that was something I spoke about with Rob, what he'll be opening up more in that interview. Please don't miss that this Friday. Now, going into the LED lineup, or I should say, quickly jumping back to QD-OLED, I am hoping for a 77-inch, again, hoping for a heatsink, and hoping to see that if it's maybe a Master Series, how expensive will it be? Well, and if it's an A95K successor, it will definitely be a Master Series. That is a bit more money, but the heatsink to me is worth it just to protect the panel. Can't wait to see if it's designed similar to the A95K. Again, let me know what you think about or thought about last year's lineup from Sony and this year's lineup. Now, we also know that with the MediaTek Pantonic chip, we're not going to see HDMI 2.1 ports being 4. Does that really matter to you? Is that a massive big deal? We'll be discussing that further. Does that make you think that Sony is less game oriented, or they just have simply less features? Where are you in that? Do you require that? As a gamer myself, I like to have as much as in terms of gaming features as possible. But then again, are you choosing the picture quality of one over a few extra features? Those of you that love Sony's accuracy, color, and their signature, their filmmaker signature, to choose picture quality over a few features can be silly to some, not silly to others. Let me know where you are in the comments for that conversation. I'll be discussing that in a live stream tonight with FOMO. It's being talked about everywhere. Let me know what you think in that regard. Jumping into LEDs, we had the X90K last year, successor to the X90J. Full array, local dimming, it is a huge seller. The panel below that, the X80 is also a big seller. I didn't have the opportunity to review that one myself. Let me know what you think about that tier. The 80 or 800 series for years has been a big seller, especially with the larger TVs. I went from X90K, X95J, and the Z9K, covered and reviewed all of those, spent a lot of time with all of those models. But let me know if you experienced the X80, what you think of that part of the platform. We're going to focus on the mid to top tier. Again, Sony has simplified their lineup from back in the day where you had a 900E, 930E, 940E, Z9D. It's more streamlined now. You have one 8K model. Last year, the Z9K, before that, the Z9J, in comparison to Samsung, which had the 900A, 900B, 800A, 800B, even a 700A. They are more streamlined, leaving just a few panels, but putting everything into them. What were your thoughts on the X95K from last year? It was the return of the backlight master drive. Many of you were disappointed that there weren't more sizes available. I think, at least thought this last year through their focus groups, that 65 inches for a flagship or TV of that cost was the sweet spot. So they went 65, 75, and 85. Many of you still love 55. The 950H and the X95 had more sizes. I believe, I know the 950H definitely had more sizes. I had a 43-inch here, I believe. Anyway, what are your predictions for that? Do you feel that the Perhaps the X90K successor will be mini LED a la Hisense, where their whole lineup is a mini LED. Again, I have no information. I'm just speculating. For me, I believe they'll stay with full array local dimming. Expect the same improvements for the X90, which again is a TV that always gets beat up when it first launches. The X90 was killed in reviews. The X90K was killed. I like them both a lot, and towards the end of the year. And remember, guys, when it comes to TV reviews, it's not about, well, it is about getting the information out fast and quick, reviewing it, and moving on. Not so anymore. With influencers and firmware updates and TVs having features added and even taking away through firmware updates, the review in the beginning of the year means very little. It's more of a first impressions. And then at the end of the year, you guys kind of follow up and say, should I buy that? The X90K became one of the most popular TVs in their lineup, affordable, large sizes, great local dimming. Variable refresh rate was added a few months into the year, which I'm excited about this year. We don't really have to have that conversation. Last year, we thought it'd be out of the box. It arrived later in a firmware update and then followed on the other panels. This year, I'm glad we won't have to deal with that. It'll be available from jump. You'll just have to discern if HDMI 2.1 needs to be on 4 inputs for you. Less of a big deal for me if the picture quality is much better than the competitors. So X90, I think it'll be full array. Again, you'll see a jump in the processing and its quality. The X95 successor, I think, is very interesting. We saw the return of the backlight master drive. I loved the 85-inch version. That was the TV that I had reviewed and spent the most time with. Other reviewers struggled with the 65-inch. Can't tell if that was purely the 65 or defective panels, but it was out there that there was more blooming on that. Let me know what you think. Where were you with the differences in sizes? Was the backlight master drive something you were happy to see back? The technology, as I remember it, with the Z9D and the Z9G is very expensive. Will it return? Again, I have no idea. I hope it returns. But even talking with Rob with Sony's signature, blooming is always a concern for them, but their signature is accuracy and shadow detail. They'll never crush blacks. They will leave that detail where the filmmaker said it. If blooming is there, so be it. The backlight master drive helps mitigate that. Did you think it did a good job? Are you looking forward to seeing it back? I personally am, and I hope it does make return in the X95 successor. Will we see more mini LEDs? Sony does not disclose their zones, their processing, their algorithm, their local dimming is elegant. They keep that close to their chests. What are your thoughts on that? Especially the signature, Sony versus Samsung. Sony's shadow detail being retained and keeping its peak brightness. It doesn't dim down, where with Samsung does flatten out, lose some of that detail, but blooming is almost non-existent. But at times you can lose specular highlights. Something like the Z9K remained a light cannon no matter what was on screen, but blooming is the side effect to that. Going into the 8K lineup, I believe we'll see another flagship Z9K successor. Now, to me, the Z9G was the beast a few years ago. 4,000 nits. Are we getting away from nits? Do nits really matter that much? If you can't control it, or if it clips, or if the content isn't there, all of that is very important. I think you'll still see one 8K mini LED type TV. The question for me with Sony would be, are we going to see YouTube have 8K? Are we going to see the HDMI ports play 8K? Not that there's any 8K content, but we're still looking at 8K. I still like 8K, especially as a PC gamer. But for me, at the end of it, I'm looking very much forward to what they're going to do. Again, they're the only company to have all these different technologies. Full array, mini LED, WRGB OLED, and QD-OLED. They're the only ones that are nimble and have one in each category. I personally, reiterating what I said before, I'm hoping for an 83-inch version of something that can actually beat out the G3 at 83. maybe even brighter, kind of like, as I mentioned, an A90J successor. I would love to see them do that again with a heatsink. Give us an option that was missing last year. The Master Series typically blankets 2 years. I'm not sure you're going to see that again with the A95K. You may see a successor. Well, I think you're definitely going to see a successor there. Is the QD-OLED going to have more than two different, not just two different sizes, but two different classes? Will you see an A80, QD-OLED like you see with Samsung's S95C and S90C? Amazing to speculate, to discuss. That's what this channel is. This video is long as they used to be. I'll get back to doing more long form content. Very exciting. Now you know why I'm okay that Sony wasn't there. For me, again, selfishly, I wish I could have been there to film all the B-roll and to see it and bring it to you guys. But as a content creator, I was glad to be able to hang back and do more videos like this. The speculation is fun. The thoughts are fun. Don't let it run wild. Don't get scared and say, oh my God, they're not ready. They're hanging back. They're afraid. They are not afraid. Sony, for me, is going to make their own splash. And it makes total sense for them to want to hang back and say, you know what, we're going to release this when we want. The TVs this year, you should see an interesting release from Samsung, Sony, and LG when they release. February, March. They typically do what they're supposed to do. They come out when they want to come out, where TCL and Hisense are like, with them, I do feel that they hang back and they're like, now, let's go now. Where, Sony and Samsung and LG are concise with their release dates. Last year, we had LG first, with Samsung, and then Sony, where I believe the year before the 950H, we had Sony first. So it's interesting to see their strategic placements when they release. It really is something that they do, and I've mentioned this in several videos. I do feel, especially with the big three, you have three champions, and their fight camps are very interesting, especially the engineers and the people that work there, guys like Rob. They know everyone in both camps. They do speak to each other. They do talk to each other. They're very polite, but they're very competitive and they're very interested. It's very cool as a content creator and a fan to be able to see that kind of interaction. So let me know what you think in the comments. What is your speculation? I know the thumbnail is a little outrageous, but that's kind of my creativity getting out there. Because I remember the day we were there, it was like, where are they? And then I saw, being my first rodeo at CES, I saw the Sony. I was like, they're here. And then as I was getting ready to go, one of the guys was like, nah, man, it's not going to be any TVs. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, I'll have that interview with Rob Brennan from Sony. You'll get the information directly from Rob, which is amazing, and I'm so grateful to have him on. That interview is over an hour long. That'll be released Friday evening. It will premiere, so I hope you guys can watch that. It'll premiere on Friday at 5 p.m., and once that video is done, I also link it to this video. What are your thoughts? What are your hopes? What are your fears? What is your excitement? What is your prediction? Make these comments long. Never be afraid to leave long comments. If you want to put the entire lineup that you predict, let me know. Put it out there. I love the interaction and love to be in those comments, and I am so grateful that you were here. Again, thank you so much for being here. Please consider liking and subscribing. I am Brian. This is Tech Therapy. See you in the comments. Love you guys.
It's better to burn out than to fade away.